Okay, so I'm responding to question number 2, which is many rebel groups in the eastern portion of the Democratic Republic of the Congo finance their activities through illegal mining of minerals like tantalum, tungsten, tin, and gold. In 2010, the U.S. Congress passed the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act to require publicly traded companies to source all minerals exported from the Democratic Republic of the Congo from mines that are certified and tagged as conflict-free. However, the tracking system has been plagued by corruption and fraud, with minerals from uncertified mines being mixed in with minerals from certified mines. In your view, did the U.S. government's conflict minerals requirements increase or decrease the risk of conflict in the eastern portion of the DRC? So first, the question is really has the peace-building effort sparked had a positive or negative impact on this portion of the DRC? It also kind of alludes to what some alternatives may be as to what can actually be successful and what sort of peace building could actually have positive impact in that community. So a little background on what's going on in the Congo. So there's about $24 trillion worth of minerals that are in the DRC, mostly located in the eastern portion, despite it being one of the least developed countries in the world. The elements that I mentioned before, the three T's, tantalum, tungsten, tin, along with gold as well, which is not a T, but it's one of the four, have all been linked to violence specifically, and they're all very popularly used in cell phones and common electronics such as laptops. Intel has also been one of the major companies that sources its minerals from this region of the world. In 2010, in Section 1502 of the Dodd-Frank, publicly traded companies must track and report if they use materials from the Congo, and this was meant to be an effort to reduce violence, and this led to companies like Intel claiming that their products are 100% conflict-free. Conflict-free is sort of the goal here, but fault lines investigated as whether or not these companies are actually going as full conflict-free as they're claiming to be 100%, and they're trying to see if the supply chain of common electronics does not in fact come into contact with the work of that armed group. So they're really testing to make sure that are actually conflict-free. And the result of their investigation was that potential fraud and doubt that the system is in fact conflict-free. So Intel, maintained that in lieu of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform, that they were going to continue to source tantalum and tin from the Congo. And given the fact that only 10% of the mines are in fact conflict-free, it's really hard to distinguish what that actually means. A big part of that is because a lot of the mines, are technically not deemed conflict-free because they haven't been inspected free yet, but they still source from those areas, and those places don't really shut down while they're waiting for a designation because they can't really afford to. Also, a big issue is the black market, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Niabibwe was an intermediate spot in the Congo where goods were claimed to be conflict-free, but most of them had unknown origins and were sourced from places that were definitely not conflict-free. So significant amounts of tin were also moved from Rwanda and from surrounding countries that were tagged as conflict-free, and they definitely were not as well. So all of these, non-conflict-free areas collectively, and the efforts collectively, have made it such that a lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of people who are impacted by the mining community, which is a large amount of people, are having a more difficult time. And so, given that background information, my answer to the initial question is that I think that it makes the conflict can be better resolved, and that there could be less risk in the region if this is properly reformed. I just think the peace building has not been entirely successful yet, and the U.S. needs to build on what they already have in place. By way of example, they could mandate federal inspection criteria in that region so that every place that these companies are getting their materials from needs to have already been certified, so that this way, economically, these places that are not certified will not be prospering. The U.S. is clearly not entirely on top of making sure that all materials are produced conflict-free, so there should be more conscious efforts to get companies, like Intel, to solely purchase from those who are certified. And there may be economic hits in both the U.S. and in the Congo at first. However, those will be felt more so down the supply chain, and the people of the Congo, especially the ones who are causing conflicts, will be less likely to actually, have conflict because they won't be able to survive economically if companies like Intel are not purchasing them. These mines will either die or they'll have to adapt so that they are in fact conflict free. So a counter argument would be that right now there is a seemingly decreased risk, in the long term there might be a seemingly decreased risk, but it's negated in the short term because miners whose livelihoods depend on mining are worse right now. So that argument would be that the risk is greater than the reward, and that the system is only increasing the risk in general. So I would refute that by saying that if the peace building effort is thorough, that eventually minds will be forced to shift, and the people who had their livelihoods impacted by either losing their work, losing money, or being in a conflict-free zone and reaping the impact of that will now have better lives, and there will be less conflict in general. Also, the economic hit will, in the long term, probably more apply to companies like Intel. So this would cause long-term decreased risk despite a perception of short-term harm, which is why I would definitely refute that claim.